Hey guys, welcome back to Matastic Days. Today we're going to talk about the Math Level 2 SAT subject test. Like all the other videos about chemistry and biology, we're going to talk about Math Level 2. There's so many resources out there about Math Level 2 subject test because of its difficulty, and it's hard to get an 800 on this, and so there's so many resources out there for Math Level 2. I find not as much as Level 1. But for Math Level 2, there's so much out there. So I will also recommend a lot of online resources throughout this video for the Math Level 2 subject test. So, a little bit of an introduction. There's multiple choice questions. You have 5 choices, A to E. You lose 1 out of 4 points, which is negative 0.25 for getting a question wrong. So if you get a question wrong, that means you actually lose negative 1.25 marks, because first of all, that question is worth a mark, and then on top of that you got it wrong, so you get negative 1.25 marks off, and that is what you call negative marking. Now let's say you have 4 questions on a test, you guess 2 of them and both of them are wrong, but the other ones are right, the other 2, you're gonna get 1.5 out of 4. It would have been better if you didn't guess those questions, because you would have gotten 2 out of 4. So that's why. So with these tests, just don't guess. 20% chance of getting it right. So it's better you not guess unless you come down to 2 or 3 options and you know the others are wrong. So let's get a basic idea of the test. You have an hour, like all SAT subject tests. It's points from 200 to 800, and you have 50 multiple choice questions. You're allowed to use a calculator. You can look at College Board's calculator policy, but in general, the TI-83, TI-84, all those calculators, they're fine to go. So I'm going to talk about the difference between level 1 and level 2, why some people choose level 2 and why some people choose level 1. So level 1 covers arithmetic of complex numbers, but level 2 also covers graphical and other properties of complex numbers along with the arithmetic stuff. Level 2 includes series and vectors too. Level 1 contains mainly algebraic equations and functions, but level 2 you'll have more advanced equations and functions. So you're going to have exponential, logarithmic, and trigonometric, but in level 1 you're not going to have that. You're just going to have algebraic mostly. Level 1 is just, I don't know how to pronounce this word. I'm gonna butcher this word. Euclidean, I don't know, this sounds like a French word, but it's a specific form of geometry and measurement, and it is not tested directly on level 2. But in level 2, you're gonna be doing like 3D geometry, so that's like coordinate geometry and like 3D shapes on a coordinate plane. You're going to be dealing with that. Level 2, you're going to be having ellipses, hyperbolas, polar coordinates, and those 3-dimensional coordinates. And trigonometry questions in level 2 have trigonometric functions, inverse trigonometric functions, trigonometric equations and identities, and laws of sines and cosines, whereas in level 1 you don't have so much of that. But both level 1 and level 2 include mean, median, mode, range, interquartile range, data interpretation, and probability. Level 2 also includes standard deviation, which is a topic on its own that you can definitely teach yourself. Both include least squares, linear regression. So both have linear regression, but level 2 also has quadratic and exponential regression. So what you see is that level 2 covers more concepts and more difficult concepts than level 1. Hence, level 2 is known as the harder exam. But there are some topics that are not in level 2 but in level 1. So, I mean, it's up to you which one you take, level 1 or level 2. I'm here to talk about level 2, so stay tuned if you really want to learn more about level 2. In level 2, it's easier to get a higher score because the test is harder. With SAT subject test, the testing, the marking is very different, and you can actually watch my whole SAT subject test, part 1, part 2, detailed sort of like short series. So I have like 2 videos, and they like explain detailed, the way the marking works in the SAT subject test. And I really cover that topic in depth. But for here, it's easier to get a higher score on harder SAT subject tests, on the harder one, like Biology M. You can get a higher mark than biology E, which is easier. A 640 in level 1 may mean a 660 for level 2. Like, let's say you got 35 questions right for both of them, you know, level 1 35, but in level 1 it might mean like 640, but in level 2 it might mean 660. And I'm just giving an example situation. I haven't really calculated any of this. This basically means you'll have more of a margin of questions to get wrong. So you'll have more of like a space or leeway to kind of get your questions wrong or leave them out. And I find that to be super beneficial because it's easier to get above 550, which is required for PTAP, SFS. You know, you have the self-finance, the Pakistan Technical Assistance Program, you have normal colleges. You know, they all require above 550, and level 2 is a good option for you if that's what you're looking for. Now, if you're here not for getting admission into Pakistani med schools, then the whole situation changes up. So you really have to look at whether or not level 2 is actually beneficial for you, depending on the amount of math you know and how good you're with it. Are you great with trigonometry? If you're not, then I don't recommend taking level 2. So if you're not here from that medical perspective, then definitely look at it more closely to see, and just check out other videos to see if level 2 is really the thing for you. So I'm going to talk about multiple choice. Standard multiple choice questions with 5 options. We got that, right? The test goes from easy to hard. Every SAT subject test goes from easy to hard. The last couple of questions are usually the hardest, and they usually take the longest too. The first few questions are the easiest, and they also take the least time. So there are a couple of different types of questions. There are those with a situation, and they'll give you like options, and they'll be like I, and I. Like, you'll have different options, and you'll have to like talk about which one's like true and which one's not, and like is both I and I are true. And there's those types of questions, which I'll show you an example of. There are questions that ask you to find X, which are general math multiple choice questions. There are questions that ask you to that target function specifically, and they're like those f of x type of question. So there's various different math concepts that are combined, and what I see in the SAT subject test is the further you go in the test, the level 2 test, you'll find that concepts are built on top of each other. Like, the harder questions involve more of different concepts. Like, different concepts are piled up into the questions, so you'll have to combine quite a few units to actually answer those questions. There are questions that simply test your ability to use your calculator efficiently. So there are those types of questions too. And that's it. And there's also a type of question where they'll give you like chart, and they'll ask you to find standard deviation, and those are usually like the graph/data analysis type of questions. So this is an example of a math multiple choice question. The mean height of the students in class A is equal to the mean height of students in class B, but the standard deviation of the class heights for class A is less than the standard deviation of the heights for class B. Both classes have the same number of students. Which of the following must be true? So you're gonna have I. So you're gonna read through all of these, and then you're gonna have to answer which one is true. The heights of the students in class A are more closely grouped about the mean height than are the heights of the students in class B. The median height for class A is less than the median height for class B. The range of the heights for class A is less than the range of the heights for class B. So for this type of question, it's really important to understand standard deviation and the way standard deviation works, and standard deviation has a specific formula. So without going too much into the math, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, like, the answer is A for this question, one only. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of give you an idea of how these these types of questions work, the I questions, okay? And this is what it will look like. So the next type of question are usually about the XY plane, or the f of x questions that I told you about. So in the XY plane, the graph of y equals f of x is symmetric with respect to the y-axis. Which of the following is true? The answer to this is B. f of negative x equals f of x. So with this, it's really about knowing transformations and the way functions work, and really knowing symmetry. These types of questions get a little tricky but there's a trick to actually solve them. And there's tons of ways to solve them, and they're really concept-based questions. Like, this doesn't require you to do math. It is question number 43. It's one of the hardest questions, but it's a very concept-based question. It's very theory-based, I like to call it. So these are very theory questions, whereas like other ones might be simple, just finding x, and they're the questions that you can easily do with a calculator. But these types of questions, they're theory-based. So it's really about knowing the concept and understanding well, and you just have to know the way function work and what the meaning of the absolute. This is absolute value, these straight lines. And you just have to know which one is true. And you can actually, the way that most prep books tell you to do this is to actually test it with numbers. So you're going to actually test f of negative x, and you're going to see if it actually equals f of x. Like, is it symmetric with respect to the y-axis? So is the symmetry, like, you'll have to really visualize this. Like, I can't really show you because I don't have many writing tools on this laptop to like show you the graph and like show it to you. But essentially, if it's respect to, like, if you have a graph like that, it has to be symmetric to the y-axis. So this like vertical sort of plane, it has to be symmetric to that. And you have this simple function. So think of any function, and you're gonna have to see, does f of negative x equal f of x? And that's basically the question. You can do this using a calculator, inserting numbers. There's many methods to do it, whichever one you find most easiest for you, but these are very concept-based questions. Now, this is like a normal question you'll see with trigonometry. If cotangent x equals 7 over 8, what is the value of cotangent 4x? We know cotangent is 1 over tan, or cos x over sine, so it's like cos over sine, whereas tan is actually sine over cos. In this, because you flipped it, because you've done the inverse, 1 over something is inverse, so then it actually becomes cos x over sine. So basically your cos is your x value and your sine is your y value, so it's x over y. So you have this, and what you have to do is, there's a trick to do this question, and it's a very calculator type question. These are the type of questions that I call calculator type. If you look into the Princeton, they give you a bunch of different cool tricks to solve these types of questions because they come very commonly. You'll always see a question like this, and it's really about knowing the right mode in your calculator, radian, degree, working with those modes, and knowing how to use your calculator and how to deal with numbers like this and solving them really fast. So the answer to this is E, 3.67. I don't want to do the math for you right now because I really want to give you an idea of what are the types of questions you get. We're not necessarily here to talk about, the content of the questions. We're here to talk about, what types there are. So it's really about using your calculator efficiently, and these are the questions that you can solve very easy. These are more medium level questions. You'll see them midway through the test. Now I'm going to talk about prep books. So my number one top choice for each subject test is Princeton. I love Princeton. It has helped me so much with my own SAT studying. Barron's is harder, and it's basically one of those books that over prepares you for the test. So it basically gives you harder content than the actual SAT subject test. Whereas McGraw-Hill, there's very short explanations for each topic. So the main ones I used were Princeton Review, McGraw-Hill, and for Barron's, I used the practice test because the practice test really gave me a deeper understanding of each of the concepts, because Barron's has this really cool way of really combining different concepts together in math, and challenging you to do really hard questions. And I find that to be super beneficial if you really want to get a deeper understanding of a math concept. Whereas Princeton Review has a very conversational sort of way of teaching, and the concepts are explained in depth. They give you cool calculator tricks. and I find that really cool. And the other thing is they have drills at the end of each topic, and they also have really great practice tests. And the practice tests of Princeton I find are the closest to the actual SAT subject tests sort of questions. Whereas Barron's are harder, and McGraw-Hill, their tests are easier. So you'll find that McGraw-Hill is easier, Barron's is harder, Princeton just comes in the middle. So a must-have. So you definitely need to have the official SAT subject test guide for Mathematics Level 2 from the College Board. You can find this on Amazon. You might be able to find it in your library. But this is a must-have book. Without this book, it will lower your chances of getting an 800 because this book has real SAT subject tests, and that's why I recommend it. And they don't just have 2 tests. The other ones have 2 tests. These ones have 4 tests. Okay, this book has 4 SAT subject tests for Math Level 2. And you should be doing this at least a week or 2 weeks before the test. You shouldn't be doing these at the beginning of your studying because it won't give you like an idea before the test. Like, you want to have an idea of where you are before the test, like a week before the test, a couple of days before the test, just so you know how much improvement you've gotten, or like how prepared you are for the test, because this will give you a very real idea of how prepared you are for the test. For me, it was really just practice that got me along with the math, and I actually did the Math Level 2 twice. So, and I found a score improvement. Like, the second time I practiced a lot more, and I found that it improved my mark extensively. So it's really good to get this book and practice a week or 2 weeks prior. You should be studying like a month in advance because this is math and you need time and you need practice for this. So make sure to have that allocated time. And it's really all about organizing and scheduling this type of stuff in your schedule. But let's get to the online resources. So you have crackset.net, you have Scalar Learning YouTube channel, you have Organic Chemistry Tutor, and you have Khan Academy. They all do SAT subject test preps, and Scalar Learning, this is a recent one I looked at. So they have really cool videos on how to like solve different SAT subject test questions. Like, they'll give you that question, it'll be a real SAT subject test question, and they'll help solve it with you. And I find that to be super helpful because they tell you how to use your calculator effectively, and they give you some really nice tricks, and what is the easiest way to get to the answer, because some of these questions, they're really easy. The reason is because the concept is sort of like reversed, or like it's the way they present it and word it is very different. But so when you look at that question, you might you might feel overwhelmed, and you might overcomplicate it, and you might think, oh my god, this is so hard, how do I get to X? It really isn't. It's really about simplifying what they've given you. And there's usually always an easy route to the question and a hard route to the question. So you can go the hard, long way, or you can go the easy way. And the easy way always involves the calculator. Now there's some questions that don't need calculator. You just need to know theory, and one of those ones would be standard deviation questions. Usually, like, they'll ask you the I questions. Okay, we're back at the I questions. So it's really an understanding of the concept. So there's some theory questions, and there's some like very easy math calculator type questions. And then you have the Organic Chemistry Tutor. He also has some nice, good videos, quality content, I tell you, on those math topics like hyperbolas, ellipses, coordinate geometry. I didn't know any of that. I didn't learn that being in the Alberta curriculum, so I had to teach myself those concepts. And quadratic regressions, exponential regression, like, there's so many videos out there on YouTube to help you. Khan Academy comes along with those topics. So if you find Khan Academy something you're more comfortable with, do that. If you find the Organic Chemistry Tutor more comfortable with, do that. So it's really about your personal choice. And then we have crackset.net. They have a bunch of like online tests, SAT type questions, SAT subject test type questions on different topics, and they have full versions too. But I find like the short topic ones are really cool, because let's say you're struggling on a topic, you can easily go on crackset.net and find your topic and just do the test for that and keep practicing until you get better. So that's a really great online resource. Now let's talk about the topic breakdown, and this is usually the part that takes the longest. So number and operations 10 to 14%, algebra and functions 48 to 52%, geometry and measurement 48 to 52%. So these are pretty similar. These two pretty similar. Data analysis, statistics, and probability 8 to 12%. So what you're gonna see here is the reason why it's important to know the topic breakdown is it really gives you an idea of the concepts you should really be focusing on. Like, you should know your algebra and geometry. This is what tells you. And you should know your functions, right? So transformations, holy smokes, it's all throughout the test. Your geometry, your algebra, your measurement, it's all throughout the test. In algebra, you also get trigonometric functions and whatnot, and cotangents, and there's so much out there. And what you'll notice is that you'll have the least amount of statistics and probability. So those are small concepts like standard deviation, mean, median, mode, range. You'll have number of and operations, which is 10 to 14%. So from this, you'll know that these are like they're like the bulk of the whole SAT subject test. I'm going to talk about these topics in detail because I find it's important to really look at the topic breakdown. It really gives you an idea of what you really need to study for. I'll give you some pinpointers here too. So we have math level 2. So you'll know that math level 2 just has more of trigonometry and more complex, I guess, mathematics. So topics on test, you just go under there. So number and operations, you're going to have complex numbers. You're going to have elementary number theory, matrices. So you're going to have to know matrices. There's always usually one question on matrices. This is an important question. You need to know your sequences, you need to know your series, and you need to know vectors. There's usually always a question on vectors and matrices. And they usually come under like the hard category. So when we come under algebra and functions, you're going to have to know inequalities. Inequalities are used commonly throughout the test. And it's kind of combined with expressions and so it's like a bunch of topics are actually combined and kind of like layered. Representation, modeling, properties, linear, polynomial, rational, exponential. You're gonna have to know all of these functions. So this is including trigonometric, periodic, piecewise, recursive, parametric. I don't really see too much of parametric and recursive, but they can come up. There is a possibility for any of these to come up. It's 50 questions. They can choose to put whatever they want in there. So sometimes you might not find a single question on parametric. Sometimes you find one. So it's really about knowing all of these concepts. Don't leave any of them alone because you'll know that this is bulk of the test. So any of these can pop up, and it's good to know. It's good to know all of these topics. So what I notice is they always bring up inverse trigonometric though. So like the trigonometry in this test is definitely harder. So it's really good to know your sine, cosine, cotangent, and really understand those concepts in depth. Not just like, I guess, in terms of equations and like identities, also in terms of graphing them. It's also important to know that. Let's go down to geometry and measurement. So for this, you're gonna have to know your lines, parabolas, circles, ellipses, hyperbolas, symmetry, transformations, polar coordinates. These are concepts that I commonly see throughout the SATs. Sometimes they have ellipses and hyperbolas too. They have a lot of like symmetry. They'll always have something about symmetry. Like the question I showed you across y-axis, and they ask questions that are like this. The other thing is you might see three-dimensional geometry and whatnot. So ellipses, hyperbolas, I didn't learn these, so I taught myself. It takes a little bit of self-discipline to really teach yourself, but there's a lot of helpful resources out there. You're not alone in this journey. There's a lot of people that have to do the SAT subject test, and even Americans. Like, there are some things that are not in their curriculum that come up on the SAT subject test, so don't be afraid. You might not be able to answer all of the questions, but whatever you answer on there, make sure it's right. Okay, because this is really about speed and accuracy. That's what I tell everyone. SAT subject tests are about speed and accuracy. So you gotta be right, but you gotta be fast too. So this is what I talked about: three-dimensional geometry. So cylinders, cones, spheres, prisms. These are very basic concepts, but the way they present them on the SAT subject test is a little different, where they'll combine these sort of like three-dimensional geometry with another concept too. So it's important to know how you can layer those concepts. That's why the hard questions are ones that you should really like practice, because they're the ones that are going to give you the hardest time. So for for some reason I can't speak today, so please forgive me. So for trigonometry, you're going to have right triangles, identities, radian measure, law of cosines, law of sines, equations, double angle formulas. Double angle formulas are so common in this, and you're going to need to know your law of sines and law of cosines. And you need to know the ambiguous case. So if you're studying like law of sines, I think it's sines, you need to know the ambiguous case. And for law of cosines, you need to know how to like manipulate the formula for it, because there is a formula for law of cosines, and just know how to manipulate the formula effectively. And there's really cool quick tricks to solve these questions which involve law of sines in the Princeton book. For data analysis, statistics, and probability, basic things, standard deviation, just know that. You don't need to know your linear, quadratic, exponential regression. The time I did it, I think I saw quadratic regression. I don't remember correctly, but I know I like saw one of these in one of the SAT subject tests I took. So it's important to really know all of these concepts, even interquartile range. This one gets me, and it comes up commonly in the SAT test. So all of these concepts they give you here, like, don't take them useless. This is a nice little guide. It's like a nice little guide to help you really be on top of your game. And here they give an Khan Academy video, so you know there's resources out there for you. Calculator tips. They have a nice calculator tips here. And there's a bunch of rules on what happens if your calculator breaks down, and if you don't, do you cancel your scores, make sure to read through all of those rules. And as I told everyone before, in my past videos, the detailed SAT subject test guide, make sure to read through the student guide to know all the rules. The other thing is, the really cool thing about the calculator is you don't have to like delete your history. You don't have to like clear the complete history for your calculator. So what this gives you is a chance to download really nice programs on there that might help you out in the test. So if there's a quadratic solving program, get it onto your calculator, get it onto your TI-83. It's just gonna save you time. Small programs that like will help you save time and will do your calculations fast for you, so you can actually get to the answer of the question. Like yes, you can do a quadratic on your own, but what if you have a program for it? It just does it for you. So you can download programs, because you don't have to clear your history. You're not required to clear your history. So like by history, I mean like completely clear the RAM of your calculator. You don't have to do that. You do have to like obviously press the clear button and make sure there's no calculations above that, but like you don't have to clear your RAM. So now I'm going to talk about how to get a perfect 800. So you have to use your prep books efficiently, and I mentioned this for literally every one of my SAT prep videos. So use your prep books efficiently to learn topics you struggle with or don't know. They have a lot of cool tricks, and even the topics that you do know, skim over them. Give yourself a little bit of a review using those prep books. They have cool practice questions on there, and they have example questions where they literally show you step by step how to get to the solution. And they'll give you SAT type questions, and I find that super helpful because I see that in the Princeton, and that's why I recommend it to you guys. There's also a bunch of YouTube channels that are able to help you with that. So I did watch a bunch of YouTube channels, and there would be people that would actually go through each question in the SAT subject test for a level 2, and they would literally like show the step-by-step process that is involved in getting to the answer of the question. And I found that to be super helpful because it shaped my mindset. So when I would see a question, I wouldn't just freak out. I would look at it and I'd be like, okay, let me simplify this. What are the concepts involved in this? How can I use my calculator to the best of my ability? It's really, 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 really important to know your calculator well. Your calculator is your best friend during this test, so know your calculator well. So practice tests, you should do them at least 3 weeks prior to the SAT. You should get on them. You should be doing a lot of them. Even if there's practice tests in the McGraw-Hill, they're easier. Start with them. Do whatever practice tests you can online. the ones on their website, they have a couple questions on their website to as many as you can till the day of the test. This is a standardized test, so everything is standardized, which means that there's certain types of questions they put on there, and they're very predictable. Standardized tests, they're predictable. You just have to practice and know what to expect. And when you're doing these practice tests, make sure to time yourself and treat it like a real SAT subject test. If you don't do that, you will not get a real idea of how you're doing with these tests and what you need to work on. Sometimes you might need to work on accuracy, sometimes you might need to work on speed. So it really gives you an idea when you time yourself and you do the real SAT subject tests. So make flashcards with concepts you don't know and questions you get wrong. Look over them every day until the day of the test. So I'm literally going to tell you to get a notebook and write what you did wrong for a question and how you can correct your method, how you can do it better next time. So you're going to have to do that. The other thing is find calculator shortcuts by watching helpful videos on YouTube or getting tips from Princeton. So there's a lot of cool calculator shortcuts that you should just know. Just know your calculator well. 50% of the test is calculator. You're not going to survive that test with a scientific calculator. You need a graphing calculator, so please get one. 5. Download programs onto your calculator, like I mentioned before. So quadratic solving programs, other programs that might help you. There's some for matrices too. I just downloaded the quadratic solving program, and the other thing was I put in some formulas, to remember some formulas. I have a way of I have this really bad memory problem, so I put in some of those formulas in there in a way I could see them, and I wouldn't have to memorize so many of them. So it's really up to you how you want to do this, but know your calculator. So that's it. Thank you for joining my test today. Subscribe to my channel, like, comment, share, and press the bell notification. Also watch my other detailed SAT subject test videos to get more information on how the scoring really works for this test. And that's it. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. See you next time.